What's up, everybody? This is Jordan from Wednesday Night Warhammer with another Tyranid Tactics video. This week, we're comparing our two best bugs at destroying tanks. We're going to compare the Tyrannofex and the 6-man Zoanthrope blob. There's a lot of similarities between these two units, and there's a lot of things that are different. So through this video, I'm going to walk you through strategies for both of these units, why I'm recommending one unit over the other, and hopefully you get some good ideas about how to conquer some high armor in Warhammer 40k with your beautiful space bugs. What's up, everybody? It is Jordan here, of course, talking about our wonderful sponsors at Secondhand Geek. If you were not aware, we're giving away a free Leviathan box, courtesy of those guys. They sent it to us and they wanted me to send it to you. If you haven't entered our giveaway, last day for entry is tomorrow, April 14th, that Monday. All you need to do is click the affiliate link down below and you're entered in for the giveaway. Sign up through us on secondhandgeek.com, of course, and then you're there. We already have about like 300 people signed up, which is just crazy. But even if you were to sign up, even with all those people, a 1 in 300 chance to get like a $350 box, I would take those odds too. While you're signed up, go ahead and check out all the cool stuff that Secondhand Geek has on their website. They have used miniatures, they have used terrain, used paint, whatever you may need. In addition, they have incredible commission services, and every single purchase that you make on their easy-to-use website is going to support local game stores like the one you play at every single weekend. So head on over there, grab yourself some Zoanthropes, sell your Zoanthropes to get Tyrannofexes, whatever you need to do. I'll see you over there. For your next hobby purchase, consider secondhandgeek.com, your first choice for secondhand games and supplies. The reason I feel like this is a good topic for a video is because the Tyranids have a problem with high armor. You know, they struggle with it. A lot of our long range strength, besides the two units that we're talking about, caps out at around strength 10 with the Maliceptor. And there isn't a whole lot of variety for choices for Tyranids to have a dedicated unit to kill those high armor, the high toughness units that are actually really prevalent in the game right now. A lot of times Tyranids just move to the idea of scoring and ignoring these big units. And that's a playstyle that is very successful in competitive scenes, I think, a lot of the time. But there's going to be a time where you just can't ignore everything, you know? And having 1 to 2 units that are dedicated at taking out those high toughness value targets, I think is definitely necessary in every single list that you bring in Warhammer. So throughout this video, I'm going to talk about why I kind of, value one of these units over the other, the reasons why, but I'm also still going to give some ideas about how to use each of them in the game so that we can be a little bit more successful going into Knights or Space Marine tank spam or something like that, so we don't immediately die to the first thing with toughness 12 that they put in the center objective. I think now is a good time to compare these two units because the most recent data slate put the Tyrannofex at the same amount of points as a 6-man Zoanthrope. In this video, I'm not really going to be putting into effect the points cost of a Neurotyrant that takes up, attaching to the Zoanthropes to make them hit on 2s, because in most Tyranid lists, you're probably just going to be running a Neurotyrant. It's a very good unit, and it provides a lot of synergy for your list, and then just slapping 6 Zoanthropes onto it as well is very strong too. But I think it's important to understand which one of these units is probably better at killing high toughness, high armor moving forward, because Tyranids do struggle into lists that have T11, T12, and like high saves, like Knights, Demons, Space Marine vehicle tanks, and even like going up against the mirror match with Tyranids. If you're going into a Crusher Stampede list, you want to make sure that your anti-tank gun is going to activate efficiently. So at this point, I actually really favor the Tyrannofex as my anti-tank unit as opposed to the Zoanthropes. And I'm going to talk about a bunch of ideas in this video as to why. Not trying to convince you, if you're a Zoanthrope stan, you still have, that's perfectly fine as well. but I'm just trying to put out my ideas as why I think the Rupture Cannon Tyrannofex really fits our anti-tank slot in our list pretty well. But first, we're going to talk about the variety of shots that you can get from the Zoanthrope and go into detail about how the Zoanthrope's weapons activate. Zoanthropes do have two very good weapon selections. They have the Blast Anti-Infantry. That's going to be D3 shots with Blast, of course, Strength 7, AP2, and D3 damage each. And then they also have the Last Cannon shot, which is lethals for some reason. I've always thought it's strange that the Zoanthrope's Last Cannon has lethals. But anyways, one shot per, Strength 12, AP3, and then D6 plus 1 damage. Both pretty good guns. The problems that I have are mostly with the blast profile. It's Strength 7, which is an okay ranking point. It's not necessarily where we want to be all the time. If it was Strength 8, that would be phenomenal. That means we would be wounding a lot of Space Marines on 2s all the time, and I think that would definitely be a different conversation, which is kind of interesting how one pip of strength can shift how I feel about a unit. The big problem that I have with that gun, as opposed to the Strength 7, is the AP2 and D3 damage. One, AP2 is not really where you want to be. I think in 10th edition, covers everywhere. So pretty much almost all the time, AP2 is going to go to AP1, and that's not the best. You know, only decreasing your opponent's odd of an armor save by just 1. That means they're still going to be relatively likely to make their saves, especially if they're Terminators, you know, sitting in cover or something. Terminators on a 3-up save is really kind of gross. And then in addition, the D3 damage makes that even more swingy. So you have something that's not really decreasing an armor save too much, and then you're not very sure about the damage that is going to be going through as well. It's just another one of those caveats that makes the math a little bit swingier depending on what you're activating into. Then the Last Cannons, pretty good. Lethals, again, it's strange that the Last Cannons have lethals, but AP3 is a great place to be, and then D6 plus 1 damage. That's good. Strength 12 is pretty good as well. However, I feel like a lot of the times when we want to activate into those higher toughness units, only wounding on 4s with no real wound rerolls besides a CP can be not the best. I guess the lethals do kind of shore that up a little bit, but also wounding something on 4s, only 50% of the time that you're going to wound, and then most often whatever you're going into is going to have a pretty good save, so like a 4-up, so only wounding half the time, and then they still get to save half the time. That could be kind of tough. So throughout this video, I'm always going to assume that they're going to be attached to the Neuro Tyrant. So if I say that they hit on 2s and you're saying, oh, hit on 3s, that's because we're just assuming that they're attached to the Neuro Tyrant. We're not going to really be factoring in too much the Neuro Tyrant's weapon, because we're mostly looking at anti-tank viability. So that's where we kind of are. But moving on to my last 2 bullet points, Tyranids are great at killing infantry. You know, we really are. We have Exocrines, we have Maleceptors, we have Gene Stealers who are really good, Hive Tyrants even. A lot of options that are really good at activating into infantry. So one of my big points in this video is Tyranids have really good tools to handle specific units, and then the Zoanthropes kind of just do okay at both kind of units, you know? So what I'm thinking is with Tyranids more often, we might want to take a smaller number of specialized units as opposed of, you know, kind of diversifying when our profiles are not amazing into either of those targets, you know? Zoanthropes wounding Space Marines on 3s instead of 2s if it's infantry, and then any high tanks only wounding them on 4s with the Last Cannon as opposed to 3s with the Rupture Cannon definitely makes it so that, yes, they activate kind of okay, but they're not amazing. Again, I think I said that before, but T12 armor wounding on 4s, not really where we want to be. The Casino Cannon, the Tyrannofex Rupture Cannon. Is it a Casino Cannon? I honestly don't think it's a Casino Cannon very much anymore. It's got 2 shots hitting on 3s, of course, but it does have heavy, so it has that opportunity in order to hit on 2s, which is what we're really trying to trigger. It's Strength 18, -4 AP, and D6 plus 6 damage. That is one hell of a profile. It's very good. It also has 8 Stinger Salvo shots. We're not really going to be discussing them too much because, again, we're primarily focusing on the anti-tank aspect of this video because that is really what Tyranids struggle with. But that is, 8 shots, strength 5, AP 0, 1 damage. It's really good at killing chaff units like cultists or gargoyles or anything like that. Honestly, even going into demons because they're going to have the save that they have no matter what. It's kind of interesting to, maybe you get a couple of shots through on a bloodthirster or whatever. Maybe Stinger Salvo does some work that way. But anyways, what I'm trying to get at is, does the swinginess of the hits get balanced by the high amount of damage? So a lot of people call it the casino cannon because there's only 2 shots. And if it goes through, then you could potentially get 12 damage per shot that has gone through. That's a lot of damage. And my thought process is, because the damage is so high, I really don't think it is that much of a casino cannon. Because the minimum damage that you're going to take from this once it goes through is going to be 7. That is quite a bit. And with the fact that it's strength 18, it is wounding a lot of things on the game on 2s. And then it is definitely wounding everything in the game unless you have some kind of modifier on 3s. So always having that caveat of you're going to wound most things pretty easily is really nice. And then the potential to, if you position it correctly, hit on 2s as well. It's really nice. So you can do things like shoot an exocrine first, make sure you get the reroll 1s. Your Tyrannofex is out in the open already. Hits on 2s, rerolling the 1s. So you're probably going to get, one. You're probably going to get both of your shots in, but I am famous for rolling double 1s into double 1s with my Tyrannofex. I do that. And then the wounding potential is pretty high as well. And then once you get that damage through, it can be really, really, really nice. So I'm not really thinking that the Rupture Cannon effects is too much of a casino cannon if you are lining up the correct buffs and if you're playing it correctly. The first direct comparison we're going to make side by side is the AP of both of these guns. The Rupture Cannon being AP 4 and then the Zoanthropes Blast Cannon being AP 3. That single pip of AP is a phenomenal amount of difference. It really, really is. Thinking about that, the units that we're going to be activating into that are just going to simply not get a save at all are all of the Gladiator variants, Gladiator Lancer, Reaper, Valiant. They're all not getting a save, and including the Repulsor Executioner and any of those tanks as well. You don't get a save. Rhinos as well, Chaos or regular Space Marine Rhinos, they don't get a save. They're just going to, everything's going to go through. And in addition, things like Fire Prisms, Falcons, Wave Serpents, they don't have invulnerable saves. So AP4 is going to punch straight through and probably just demolish them. Every single time that a guaranteed damage through a wound, that is incredible. Anytime that you can punish your opponent's units for not having an invulnerable save just automatically, that's really, really good. If there's ever a time where you're able to take your opponent rolling really well on dice out of the equation and just for sure do damage, that's a very, very powerful moment in the game of Warhammer 40k. And so that's why I think AP4 is such a huge amount compared to the AP3. Now, if you're playing an opponent that is really good at making sure the units have cover, then that is of course a detriment to the AP4's strategy, but there are ways to mitigate it, i.e. Pyrophore. Pyrophores are great with Tyrannofexes as well. Now, I know that still making your opponent save on 6s with AP3 from the last cannons is, that's still hard to make, but still you are giving your opponent the opportunity to make those 6-up saves. Whereas if you have the Tyrannofex and they need a 7-up save, they just simply cannot make that on a 6-sided dice. So I know a 6 is still not super, super likely, a 16% chance of rolling a 6. However, by putting that possibility of them making an armor save through this high damage weapon, putting that chance to 0 is going to really, really help with our consistency in destroying high tank, high toughness value units. Next comparison that we are making is going to be the damage that comes out from an unsaved wound between the Blast Cannon profile and the Rupture Cannon profile of a Tyrannofex. Every single time you roll your dice, if you take the average roll, quote unquote, adding up all the sides and dividing by 6, of course, the result is going to be 3.5. So that means on average 3.5. Of course, your dice is not going to magically stand up between the 3 and 4, and nor would your opponent let you keep a 3.5 result. So we're going to round down. We're going to err on the side of caution and say that the average dice roll is going to be a 3. So that means for every unsaved Zoanthrope las cannon that goes through, the damage is going to be around 4. That also means for every unsaved damage that a Tyrannofex rupture cannon goes through, the damage is going to be a 9. That's a huge difference. That means it's going to take 3 Zoanthropes on average to go through when you compare to one Tyrannofex for the Zoanthropes to be, higher damage than the Tyrannofex on average. And I know a lot of people are going to immediately think, well, you have 3 times the amount of shots from the Zoanthropes. I think 2 very important statistics to keep in mind is the things that we talked about. One, the Zoanthrope's AP being 1 less than the Rupture Cannon. AP4 is a ginormous breaking point, and I think that really comes into effect when considering the unsaved wounds. And 2, the strength of the last cannon being 12. If you're going up against anything that is T12 or even T13, I think there's some spooky greater demons out there that are there, then that means that your rate of wounding them is also going to be much worse than a rupture cannon. So not only is that AP going to come into effect with these unsaved wounds, but also the ability to wound is also going to come into effect. I think a lot of times, I'm talking about greater demons quite a bit in this video, but a lot of times we need to use our anti-tank to pop transports so that the Tyranids can get the gooey bits inside, right? And with thinking about the average of an unsaved wound, Tyrannofex is very, very close to destroying a lot of the transports almost every single time it activates into it. Rhinos, all you need is just 1 more point of damage from anything else in your army, and then the Rhino is popped, of course, and then Eldar vehicles are in a very similar dire situation when facing out of Rupture Cannon. So, in my opinion, when considering anti-tank, the Tyrannofex Rupture Cannon is going to be leagues ahead of the Zoanthrope las cannon when looking at this example. Comparing the range of the 2 guns is also another good conversation to have. The Rupture Cannon, of course, having 48 inches versus the Zoanthropes only having a 24-inch range is a huge difference. The reason why it's such a huge difference is because the Rupture Cannon is going to be able to outrange things like Vindicators, other Exocrines, Forge Fiends, etc., and any other kind of like mid-table skirmishing tanks or ranged fire. So that means that there's a pretty good chance that the Tyrannofex is going to be able to activate into a tank like that for a turn, and then depending on the board state, if you're able to move block or prevent that tank from moving anymore, if the Tyrannofex doesn't kill it in the first go round, then there's a good chance that it will be able to activate again without that unit being shot at the Tyrannofex at all, and then another possible chance of just deleting that unit off the table. Zoanthropes don't necessarily have that ability, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. If they activate into something in the game right now, that thing is probably also going to be able to activate back into the Zoanthropes. So if the Zoanthropes don't kill something outright on the go where they come out, there's going to be a pretty good chance there's at least 1 unit that is going to activate back into a Zoanthrope squad. And that's not necessarily where we want to be with our beautiful brain bugs. So outranging things with only 24 inches is a much harder task to accomplish than outranging a unit with 48 inches, of course. The durability of Zoanthropes versus Tyrannofex is not really a comparable thing, in my opinion. The Zoanthropes are much, much, much less durable than a Tyrannofex. With T5, 3 wounds, 4 invuln, it's not that durable at all. In addition, each Zoanthrope that is destroyed greatly decreases the offensive output of that unit. And, I know Tyrannofexes will die as well, but it takes quite a bit more to even bracket a Tyrannofex than it would be to plink 1 or 2 Zoanthropes off. And because of the lower AP and the lower strength of the Rupture Cannon, as soon as you lose maybe 2 Zoanthropes, I really think that argument that the higher number of shots is going to outclass the Rupture Cannon really goes away. And that's only, 6 points worth of damage going through. Of course, it'll be 2 attacks that have to go through to destroy those 2 Zoanthropes. But it's really kind of a snowball effect with your Zoanthropes, where even after 1, 2, or 3 Zoanthropes are taken off the table, they're much, much, much less efficient than just one Tyrannofex that's able to sit out there with toughness 12, 2-up save, 1 blank per game. That can be very, very, very annoying to deal with. I very recently was running a mirror match to another invasion fleet list that was very similar to mine, and I put basically my entire army into one Tyrannofex, and it did not kill the Tyrannofex. So the Tyrannofex just running out, baiting a whole bunch of shots is also another thing to think of. Would you run out your Zoanthropes to bait out an entire army's worth of shots? I certainly wouldn't. So in that case, in the durability side, I'm still interested in taking the Rupture Cannon if I am thinking of an anti-tank unit. Okay, giving a visual representation to an in-game situation that I think could very well likely happen quite a bit. We're on Terrain 1 of Games Workshop's Terrain. It is probably one of the most common terrain setups that is played just because it's very fair and it's very balanced. I feel like it allows a lot of armies to activate in the way that they want to. But anyways, I've placed my Tyrannofex in that bottom nook right there, just behind the small rectangle, so that it is pretty hidden by anything except for that lane of fire up there with the Gladiator, let's say it's a Gladiator Lancer, up at the top. So I've poked my Tyrannofex out here almost as a trap for this Gladiator Lancer. So the Gladiator Lancer is going to come out and it's going to activate into the Tyrannofex. Let's say the Gladiator Lancer wounds twice, and that would not be the best for us. But in that case scenario, the Tyrannofex just blanks one of the wounds, and the Tyrannofex is 100,000% going to be able to live through just a Gladiator Lancer shooting and move on with his day. Then, in my turn, Tyrannofex doesn't need to move in order to activate into that Gladiator. He's just going to shoot back, hit on 2s, and there's actually a pretty good chance that the Tyrannofex picks up the Lancer in response. It's really good. So basically, the Lancer has come out, shot first at the Tyrannofex shrugs it off, and then shoots back at the Lancer, and then he's A-okay. Zoanthropes would have a very, very difficult time in this situation. They would honestly have a difficult time in this situation activating into the Lancer at all. So this is very just a point blank reason why I think Tyrannofex is going to be better an anti-tank, just because it can outrange, will blank a save, and it's going to be able to probably fire back harder than whatever shot at it. Where even getting the Zoanthropes in range of that tank would put them near the center of the table. And in my opinion, that's definitely not a place where you want your Zoanthropes early on in the game. They might not be able to make the range, and then without the blank and just a 4-up invulnerable save, there's a pretty good chance that if you commit your Zoanthropes like this, they will get picked up in the next turn. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel like this video is me just slamming on the Zoanthropes. I do think that they are a very good unit, and before we compare a couple of lists where I think both of these units function very well, and I do want to just give some pointers on the Zoanthropes. The versatility is very good. It's not the most optimum. It's kind of like a, jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing with the Zoanthropes, but sometimes that is what you need. And if the meta switches into a way where maybe there's less high toughness units and maybe there's a whole bunch of horde or swarm lists or whatever, Zoanthropes are going to activate really, really well into those units. So that could be definitely a thing. And then you kind of forego the efficiency that the Rupture Cannon has over the last cannons into high toughness stuff. Maybe you ignore that part and then just mainly take the Zoanthropes for their blast profile instead. And that could very well happen. And maybe there's a meta out there right now where that is what you weigh more than the anti-tank for Tyranids. In addition to Overwatch, is very, very, very strong, especially if you're an invasion fleet. If you're an invasion fleet and you've picked sustains against infantry and you have these guys sit next to a hive tyrant, oh my gosh, they're going to get sustained and the lethal on their blast profile, and they're going to have the neuro tyrant doing the flame as well. If you've never Overwatched with Zoanthropes, I highly recommend you do so, and in an invasion fleet as well. That is a disgusting combo, and it works very, very well. That's probably one of the things that you want to set up if you're being aggressive with your Zoanthropes. If you have to put them out to the center, make sure that there's going to be a very advantageous Overwatch for you in the next turn, so that your opponent is less inclined to just kind of bum rush your Zoanthropes. In addition, the fact that the Zoanthropes have infantry so that they can move through walls and jump out and ambush people a little bit more with more specific fire lines for them is really well. That's really good. The only thing that kind of puts a damper on it is the Neurotyrant being there. You're going to get some awkward movement because the Neurotyrant is a monster and he can't go through the walls himself. He'll have to go around. So make sure you're positioning him or positioning that unit in a way where they can all get to where they need to be and activate together. Last but not least, and I'm going to talk about this in the list that I'm going to be describing with them, is they can have some stratagem support that the Tyrannofex doesn't have access to. Anything that triggers off an infantry unit or something like that is definitely going to be helpful, specifically in Vanguard Onslaught. But anyways, don't let me persuade you to never use Zoanthropes. I'm just saying in this argument with anti-tank guns, the Rupture Cannon goes, in my opinion, way better than the last cannons off the Zoanthropes. They're still a good unit if used correctly. We've been talking a lot about just comparing the two weapons, but also the Tyrannofex is the ginormous model that, can be places on the table as well. So oftentimes I'm really aggressive with my Tyrannofex, especially if I'm going up against an army that maybe has 1 or 2 high toughness units and I'm able to take those units out early on in the game. Then my Tyrannofex doesn't really need to activate into too much other than that. So oftentimes I'll just kill a Rhino or 2 and then I'll start charging people with my Tyrannofex. And it's really good because the Tyrannofex is just going to charge something and it's going to stay there for a really long time. Your opponent's going to have to pour a lot in order to kill the Tyrannofex. And oftentimes they don't really want to, especially if you've already destroyed their tanks or whatever. They don't want to commit assets to something that really isn't going to effectively kill anything else in their army. In addition, if you're able to charge onto a point, it's OC5. OC5 is a huge stat. That's going to take off a lot of MSU units and make them commit to taking a Tyrannofex off the point. So, be aggressive. Push up a Tyrannofex, charge it with something, take OC off the point, take primary for you, and really make it a problem for your opponent. It has a 40-inch range gun, so if there's cases where you want to sit back and, just shoot from the other side of the table, that's perfectly fine as well. But challenge yourself to think, like, if I put my Tyrannofex in my opponent's face, what can they do about it? And if it's not much, do it, In addition, if it does sit into combat, it shoots very well into and out of. It can shoot at things directly in its face with its Rupture Cannon and its Stinger Salvos, of course. It doesn't have the detriment that Maleceptors or Exocrines have where its weapons are blast. So it can just charge something. If your opponent doesn't kill it next turn, then it's going to get a Rupture Cannon to the face. And it's going to kind of offset the -1 to hit from shooting in combat just because it has heavy. So it's not going to be hitting on 2s like we would really, really want it to be if it was normally standing still. But hitting on 3s into something in combat is definitely really, really strong. Last but not least, it's a huge footprint. Its gun and its base can really kind of gum up an area of a table if you're able to charge on pivot, sideways maybe, or something like that, and really just make it tough for your opponent to get to the spaces on the table that they want to. With Tyranids, it's all about controlling your opponent's movement and controlling where your opponent wants to activate and where on the board. So, be aggressive with your Tyrannofex. See what happens. One detachment and one list that I'm absolutely going to be running Zoanthropes as opposed to Tyrannofex is Vanguard Onslaught. And that's because of a couple of reasons. The stratagem that allows you to pick up a unit each turn is really good with Zoanthropes. Being able to position them in a way where they can activate into whatever they want to activate and kind of move around the field is really, really nice. One of the detriments to Zoanthropes is their low mobility. So if you play them in a detachment where you can uppy downy them and put them somewhere where your opponent isn't really wanting them to be, that can be really strong for your game plan. In addition, if you start the Zoanthropes in reserves in Vanguard Onslaught, you can use, I believe it's called Seated Broods, that stratagem, to bring them in turn 1. Maybe clear a screen or something, or maybe kill something that is going to prevent your Gene Stealers from activating in the way that they want to. Maybe pop an Orc Truck. That could be really good as well. So I do think they function really well with Vanguard Onslaught. Let's take a look at the rest of this list, and I'll talk about it a little bit before we move on to a list I would recommend with the Tyrannofex. Characters, we have 3 Broodlords, one of them with a Neuronode in order to get that juicy redeploy. So our Lictors and Genestealers are wherever they want to be. The Death Leaper, because he's just the 5th Lictor. He's really good. He's fine. He's good. Neurotyrant, so that we can get those Zoanthropes hitting on 2s. The Wing Type Tyrant with Chameleonic to allow for that picky-uppy stratagem to be free every single turn. The Wing Tyrannid Prime to help our Tyrannid Warriors out, of course. 1 squad of Gargoyles. Yes, I actually think 1 squad of Gargoyles is fine in Vanguard Onslaught, playing a different game than Invasion Fleet, where you're move blocking a bunch. It's more of just controlling the board when you absolutely want it, and then sweeping up everything else with Genestealers and Tyrannid Warriors. Speaking of which, those other data sheets, we have a Biovore, 30 Genestealers, because they're really good, so we want to play probably the most of we can of our best unit. So we got 30 of them. We've got 3 Lictors there, a Neurolictor, just kind of to help a little bit of the battle shock, but it's honestly just to have another lone op and get access to that 6-inch lone op, which if we want. Then we have 3 Raveners, which can also uppy downy every single turn we want, and they're also great skirmishing units. I love Raveners, if you did not know that. And then we have Tyrannid Warriors, which are just going to hit really, really, really hard, and then the Zoanthropes, of course, that we have talked about. So this detachment is not, of course, built around the Zoanthropes, but I definitely feel like the Zoanthropes help this detachment and this specific army list function in a way which it really allows for just Vanguard Onslaught to do what it wants, and that's just go really fast and hit really hard. Now, a list talking about the Tyrannofex. I always like to go away from Invasion Fleet when I'm giving cool examples about units that we're talking about, because I feel like Invasion Fleet is pretty self-explanatory, but for this example list for Tyrannofex, I'm talking about Synaptic Nexus. Actually really like Synaptic Nexus with the Tyrannofex, and that's mostly because of the 1 stratagem, Irresistible Will. Irresistible Will means after a Synapse unit points at something that's within 24 inches of it, if your other units are within 6 inches of that Synapse unit, they're going to get reroll 1s to hit as well as reroll 1s to wound. So it's very easy to set up a Tyrannofex to get heavy, so it'll be hitting on 2s. So after you pop this stratagem, they're going to be hitting on 2s, reroll 1s, and then rerolling 1s to wound as well. A lot of the times, the Tyrannofex is going to be wounding something on 2s, if it's strength 9 or lower, of course. But even if it's not, it's probably going to be activating and wounding something on 3. So being able to reroll 1s with your low number of shots on the Rupture Cannon Tyrannofex is really, really kind of nice, which is one of the reasons why I really like running 2 Tyrannofex in Synaptic Nexus. But let's take a look at the rest of the list. We have a Hive Tyrant. I like Hive Tyrants with full melee right now. It's just kind of more my playstyle. I don't think you're wrong running the Heavy Venom Cannon, but I'm just kind of running them with the Siding Talons as well as the Lash with Bone Sword. We have a Narrow Tyrant with the Power of the Hive Mind. Very good enhancement. We have double Gargoyles, Biovore, double Exocrine, double Maliceptor, Neurolictor, Pyrovore, Tyrannofex, and Zoanthropes. This list is not necessarily for sure, worrying about the detachment rule of Synaptic Nexus, which I think that detachment has a pitfall with, but it is more just getting really good use out of the stratagems like Irresistible Will, like the fallback shoot and charge if you're running with Maliceptors and stuff, even your Zoanthropes too, that make an appearance here. It's fun. Synaptic Nexus is really fun, and Tyrannofexes actually activate into them very, very well. That is our Tyrannid Tactics video for this week, comparing our Zoanthropes and comparing the Tyrannofex. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments. If you disagree with me, if you think that there's more of a conversation to be had between the Zoanthropes and Tyrannofex when considering anti-tank, I would love to hear that as well. While you're scrolling down to comment, like, and subscribe, of course, make sure you hit our description. Make sure you check out our affiliate link with Secondhand Geek. Enter that giveaway for the Leviathan box. It is for free. And while you're at Secondhand Geek, maybe post some of your pile of potential for sale. Maybe sell your Zoanthropes if you're heartbroken and you never want to use them and you only ever want to use Tyrannofexes. Either way, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you Wednesday. Bye.